So let me begin. Welcome again to this webinar. Are travel plans still doing their bit? You'll see some of you young ones might not know quite what that's referring to. My name is John Dales. I'm director of a small company called Urban Movement. And this webinar comes from the fact that I've involved in travel planning and a couple of particular issues recently have just brought to mind some thoughts and questions I've had over many years about travel planning. And I thought it was a good time for us all to discuss them. Deval, if you could go to my first slide, if that's all right. Thank you. This is just a little bit of a search and just a warning to us all. It's not really about this topic, but I trace the whole idea about travel plans or green transport plans, as they were originally called by Transport 2000, to their document produced in 1997 called Changing Journeys to Work. Now, the reason I just put that up here is just for us, a little bit of a reminder for us not to rely too heavily on AI, because Google's AI said that Transport 2000 from 1997 is now called Living Streets. It absolutely isn't. It's called the Campaign for Better Transport. Living Streets used to be, of course, the Pedestrians Association. So yes, they changed their name from what it was back then, and Transport 2000 changed their name from what it was back then, but not in the way that this Google AI describes. So just a little warning to us all. Next slide, please. Going on from that 1997 Transport 2000 document, this is sort of where we began to see formally the idea of green transport planning, green commuter planning, it was often called, come into the mainstream with this document produced at the beginning of the Blair government era, and when John Prescott was in power in the Department of Environment, Transport and the Regions. I'm fascinated by this because although it's famously a 1997 document, it does refer, or the version you can find online now, to a campaign launched in March 1998. So it was obviously travel timing a little bit. And it just quotes something from a DETR campaign, which did begin in March 1998. And you can see for Leon, I don't know who Leon was, obviously a young man, presumably, and for the sake of everyone, you can do your bit to make this world, our world, a cleaner, better place in which to live. And that whole idea of are you doing your bit it was a campaign for all sorts of environmental issues launched by the Blair government. Next slide, please. And I happened to take a photograph a long time ago, which this was the thing that would tend to appear sometimes on billboards, sometimes at the bottom right-hand corner of documents. And one of the things I remember reflecting on at the time, because this was about sustainability, sustainable transport, I remember seeing an advert on one billboard about this, and it felt so sort of well-meaning to say, are you doing your bit? And alongside that particular billboard was an advert for a Saab car, which had one of the Saab jet planes flying over the top of it. And I just thought this was just an interesting juxtaposition of we're trying to do good things, but actually the market commerce is taking others. If you drive, it's like you're going to be in a jet plane. And indeed, the campaign, so it was well-meaning, quite earnest, didn't have any effect. And although it began in 1998, the government scrapped it in 2004, partly because it obviously hadn't been working because car journeys had grown by 8% in that time. Next slide, please. And so following on from that, we have had a number of, the idea of travel planning and sustainable transport has developed quite a lot. This is from a March 2007 government document. And you don't need to read this. The travel plan is a package of site-specific initiatives. 7 years later, please, Deval. Travel plans are long-term management strategies for integrating proposals. And you think, well, what are they exactly? Are they this and are they that? I should say that in asking my question, are they still doing their bit, travel plans? This is not to say at all, to be really clear, that all those involved in travel planning are wasting their time or that we should be doing something else instead. It is, however, to question whether we can be doing it a lot better. And the heart of my concern about this, based on my own experience, is that some travel plans, definitely, because I've looked at them, run the rule over them, and I dare say some of you have too, are pretty cynical box ticking exercises, and they shouldn't be. And one of the reasons they are, I sometimes think, is that local authorities probably don't have the resources to basically call them out. The development's been given planning permission, and we're all moving on. And there's a Section 106 agreement that, means that the travel plan has to be done. Something purporting to be a travel plan comes is produced, and brilliant, we can sign off the Section 106 agreement. At the heart of this, I guess, is for me, is how do we best ensure that development, transport associated with new development, is as sustainable as possible, for want of a better phrase. And at the heart of that is my concern that I have never quite understood why travel plans should be a separate bolt-on to a transport assessment. If a transport statement or assessment says this is what the modes share target for this development is, everything involved in trying to achieve that mode share target should be fundamental and integral to the transport assessment or transport statement. That doesn't mean to say that the travel planning bit couldn't be a chapter, and it doesn't mean to say either that there'll be some measures that you want to monitor over time. But this disassociation of travel plans from transport assessments, I think, is one of the issues that got me thinking about it today. Anyway, that's quite enough from me. I will now hand you over to Ian Mitchell. Ian is a director at Mayor Brown, as you can see, and his experience he'll talk to you about. But obviously he comes at it from the consultancy angle. At the moment he is. I couldn't tell you what his background is. He might tell us himself. And so he's a guy who prepares travel plans, and I'm very much looking forward to what he has to say. So Ian, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, John. And I don't know if you can bring the first slide of my presentation up, please. Yeah, so we've been involved in travel planning over the last 20 years, and I wanted to talk about areas where I think, in response to the question, sort of travel planning has been doing its bit and has resulted in some quite, major achievements, I think. So I don't know if you can move to the next slide, please. So the areas I wanted to talk about were related to provision of bus services, the use of penalty payments in travel planning, and areas where travel planning has helped, approval for developments in congested areas. So next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. So just in terms of provisioning bus services, that over the years we've been working on schemes where we've given some sort of major incentives out for people to travel by bus in terms of free travel. And what we've sort of adopted is a bit of a confetti principle. So whilst the Section 106 agreement may say there's a certain requirement to give amount of free travel by bus or so, we've quite often given a lot more travel incentives than have required by the Section 106 agreement. And the reason for that has been to sort of bump up the usage of the bus services in the at the start or so we can sort of capture fare paying passengers as it goes along. And if you can move to the next slide, please. And at the Bewley scheme in Chelmsford, acting for Countryside Zest, now part of the Vista Group, and other schemes, we've had some very high bus modal shares. We actually reached a sort of peak of 29% of trips, commuter trips, being by bus, and 12% of trips during the day or so at the Bewley development. And this has been sort of matched at other developments, particularly within Essex and so. And I think this is a result because we heavily incentivized people to travel by bus. We obviously worked with the operator in terms of making sure the services were punctual, ran from early in the morning to late in the evening, etc. The bus stops with the highest caliber or so. But it has shown that we've actually been able to achieve some quite high bus modal shares. And then moving on to the next slide, please. Now, what this has meant is that in terms of procuring buses, as there's been quite heavy bus inflation in terms of driver costs, fuel costs, maintenance costs, etc. But over time, the bus operators have started to accept, if you look at point A, also that we can convert a higher and higher proportion of people from people who receive free travel to people who pay for their travel, and so the revenue side of the equation has matched the sort of the increase in costs. So that so I think that's one of our sort of big positives we think has come forward, also that the operators have become more confident that we can get people onto the bus, and consequently that that's helped the investment case for providing the bus services at new developments. Can we move to the next slide, please? Just looking at the second aspect or so, just increasingly on schemes I've been involved in, we've had the inclusion of penalty payments in Section 106 agreements, which basically means that if you don't meet the trip rate target agreed, then you have to pay more or do works up to a certain value of money until you can get the trip rate target back on target. We go to the next slide. So, and perhaps the largest one we've got at the moment is at the Chelsea Garden Community, or so, which has got progressive modal share targets at each stage of the growth of the community. So as more things come on board, education uses, leisure uses, etc., the availability of different bus services, the modal share target goes up. And then we have what's called a monitor and manage fund, which has around about sort of £3.5 million of monies in it to use for additional measures if we if we don't meet the non-car modal share targets. So just flicking back to the next slide, please. And I think the use of penalty payments that I think has helped in sort of two areas. That in terms of getting approval for schemes, we've been able to give an added contingency to the approving authority to say we believe we are right with the forecasts of the consequential traffic movements, how many people will walk, cycle, and carried by bus. But if we're not right, there is a monetary contingency that can be relied upon also to try and bring vehicle trip rates down if required. And then also what it does mean is as the developer has a monetary incentive to make the travel plan work also, because they know that they don't have to pay these penalty payments if the travel plan works. So I find in my dialogue with the developers about that, you know, we're doing this, you know, adopt the bike scheme, etc., or something like that on as part of a travel plan, also everyone can see where it's taking them, also, which is ultimately on trying to avoid the penalty payment. So that's, I think, that's the second aspect where I think the travel planning has been working over the years. And then next slide, please. Just in terms of the final side. So obviously when we started it in sort of 2022-ish or so, we didn't have many practical examples, but increasingly over the years we've got practical examples of things that have worked and things that haven't worked as well. And I think when you're doing the sort of the selling role of this scheme will work in this area because people will walk, cycle, catch the bus or so, it obviously helps in that decision-making process to rely upon things you have done that actually have worked. So if you can flick on to the next slide, please. So as a collage or so that starting on the right or so, we found Dr. Pike schemes are very effective, well used, quite popular, etc. And so that and it shows that if you can show practical examples of running them, it shows that you're, quite sincere about this sort of the cycling component of the scheme. Similarly, the free bus travel and the consequently high bus modal shares and the support of the operator, the fact that the operator will generally liaise with us about schemes wherever, etc., about working up a proposition. So I think this circle of doing things, making them work, making the developer believe there has value, also then has a progressive sort of, circular positive effect. And then moving to the next slide, please. Yeah, so as I said, so that these sort of practical examples help. And if I'll just look at an example to finish off, can I have the next slide, please? So in East Sussex, there's been a great concern about impact on the A259, and East Sussex County Council set quite a stern test to say that development in Newhaven could not come forward without if there was going to be, unless there was nil detriment on the A259, so no additional traffic. And so we've been able to work with East Sussex, and they've accepted on a number of schemes the fact that through a Smarter Choices campaign with various different travel plan measures that benefit the surrounding area also, we can show that nil detriment will occur. And basically the example, the table on the left effectively shows the equation. So we had to show there was going to be less than sort of 30 vehicles that 30 vehicles could be removed from the network in the AM peak and 40 in the PM peak. And then we showed all the different initiatives that we would run and gave them quite sort of modest, based on experience, sort of modest benefits. And then I was able to show that we were actually able to remove a lot more vehicles than the target requirement. Consequently, about 3 schemes have come forward with nil detriment on the A259 under the same Smarter Choices umbrella. So I could turn to the final slide, please. So in answer to the question John posed, yes, clearly you could do more and things could always do better or so. But I think from our experience or so that we've found you can sort of square the circle between what you're doing for the travel plan and results that actually mean something for the developer, etc., that then encourages further investment as a result. So my sort of guarded answer is, in relation to the question, are they doing their bit, is yes, well, at least for us. Many thanks, John.
Thank you very much, Ian. Just a suggestion as well, just a little reminder, everybody, if you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A box, not in the chat. If you've already put one in the chat, could you transfer it to the Q&A box, please? Ian, I was just thinking as well, and this is the same for all panelists, if you would like, when you're not on yourself, obviously, to go into the Q&A box, by all means, feel free to answer questions directly yourself there. That could be very helpful. We will definitely have more questions than we have time to deal with at the end. So if you see any questions that are for you, which will tend to be during your chat, so Ian, a few have popped up for you, which are about some details. If you've got time, by all means, try and answer some of those. I've just got one question for you myself, Ian, if that's all right. I do like you obviously carried here. The answer is yes. It reminds me of a very old Monty Python sketch, and it shows my age, which is there was a big debate about something, had massive titles, 5 people, they were all introduced, and there was a big question, and then they just ran around the panel going, yes, yes, no. And that was the end of the program. And I always found it very interesting. And of course, there's a lot more to it, as you said, Ian. And I suppose you said it's not that they couldn't be improved. Obviously, the examples you referred to there are quite large. And if I might therefore infer as well, you're talking about developments that can't be sort of tucked away. They're not really routine. The local authority is very much engaged with them. The developer has engaged some proper people to do it for them. I'm just wondering what your reflections might be, perhaps, where we're talking about something that's far more routine, smaller scale. Perhaps that might not be what your own experience is, but as you go down that scale, is it more likely that you will be getting less considered, more tick boxy? You might be getting clients who frankly aren't that fussed. They do just see it as a necessary evil, so to speak, or something that just has to be done. Any reflections on that particular point?
I think it depends on the problem more than the scale, really, isn't it? Because I mean, you could have a scheme for 300 units or so that's much more opposed than a scheme for 3,000 units, really, isn't it? And so
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily. So it's not necessarily scale related. I think it's problem related, really, isn't it? So and to be fair, also, a lot of schemes in the London areas have travel plans that are really just information packs. But that's all that's needed. It's close to railway stations, close to cycle routes. That's
Yeah.
all you need to do also. So I just find the bigger the problem, the more we have to do, really, isn't it? And so I would see it like that as opposed to a sort of tick box by scale, really.
Okay, thank you. Just one particular question for Bewley Park from Keith Homer about Bewley Park, which I'll pass on. And if you could answer that now, and then I think we'll move on. And if you can have a look and see what you can find in the Q&A box yourself, that would be great, Ian. It's about, and there were a couple of questions about the Bewley Park one, and Keith's question was, in terms of the bus mode share, was this during? I didn't know. Was this during the free bus travel period, or at a time when residents had to pay for their own at normal tariffs? And also, just a separate question related to that was, how do you think that COVID times affected any of the monitoring that was done there?
Yeah. So the answer to the question is obviously things like Bewley and other schemes are ongoing. So
Yeah,
there's always a chunk of people with free travel at the time of monitoring. So yes, so that the 29% figure includes a component of people who are free travel and a component of people who aren't or so. I mean,
yeah,
I suppose our other statistic was a kind of conversion rate. And so pre-COVID, then it was getting up close to sort of 60% of people who went from free travel to paid travel when
yeah,
we invited them to sort of buy their season ticket at the end. Post-COVID, what's happened is people's ticketing requirement has changed. So modal share went down initially post-COVID because people were a bit reluctant to go on a bus with other people or so, but it's been picking up quite a lot since. But the ticketing, what we do on ticketing has changed now because people don't want annual tickets really because they might work from home twice a week or something like that. So we do a lot more different sort of ticket types. Yeah. So
okay.
yeah.
Thanks, Ian. Sorry, I've just realised we are going to have to move on. So thanks for your time again.
Okay.
You and all panelists, if you can fish around in the Q&A, see what you can find. But thank you very much indeed for that. We're going to Nick now he's the COO of ModeShift, like it says here. Nick, take it away.
Cool, thanks, John. I thought I'd unmuted then, but apparently not, so had to do it a second time. So I've set myself the challenge of giving you the whole history of ModeShift's involvement in travel plans over 10 minutes, covering 24 years of history, what our role is, why we do them, how we sell them, how we secure them, how we monitor them, and then what plans we've got coming up next as well. If the tech works, it should just advance itself. So here we go. So first off, who we are. We believe communities are healthier, wealthier, more inviting when people are given the opportunity to walk, wheel, ride, and use public transport for their everyday journeys. And note the intentional inclusion of we're not talking about sustainable or active travel there, just purely everyday journeys. How we do that, we support, inspire, and champion individuals and organisations that are working to enhance everyday journeys. And we refer to that collective unit as Team ModeShift. And I'm sure there's many Team ModeShift members on the call today, and you can see how that's changed over the years. So just under 70, 2011, to over 380 right now. And specifically on travel plans, we have our STAR scheme. So since 2008, over 8,000 travel plans have been accredited through the Motive STAR scheme. Our 4 schemes there: education, business, residential and healthcare, and launching just last week, STARS Leisure for venues and events as well. And important to note, backed by Active Travel England. This is our definition of travel plans: strategic plan of action designed to enhance everyday journeys. It should include a bespoke package of measures designed to increase levels of sustainable active travel, and it should be based upon a sound understanding of how and why the target audience chooses to travel the way they do. Here's the history. So 2001, we first set up as under the catchy title of UK Last, the United Kingdom Local Authority School Travel Forum. Following on from that, the government, the DfT and DFES, launched the Travelling to School initiative in 2003, with the target of every school having a school travel plan by 2010. We went beyond schools in 2007 with the launch of ModeShift, focusing with the changing from UK Last, and launched our STAR scheme in 2008. And by 2010, we had 65 members and 94% of schools had produced a travel plan. So about 18,000 travel plans nationally. 2014, we went beyond that. Our members were increasingly working on other areas beyond schools as well. And our STARS platform went online. So previously a paper-based scheme, we moved to an online platform for people to develop and implement their plans. And with STARS being successful, our members then asked us to make STARS work for workplace and residential plans as well. Our first ever National School Travel Awards took place Houses of Parliament 2015. We rebranded our schemes to the ones you see now, so STARS Education, STARS Business, STARS Community. And then we had our first Minister of State attend our awards in 2019, handing out the awards to the top school travel plans in the country. Last year, we launched the STARS Healthcare Scheme in partnership with NHS England, so that travel plans were more tailored to their needs. March this year, the launch of the National STARS Travel Awards, so including businesses for the first time. And then just last week, launching the STARS Leisure Scheme with spectator and audience travel guidance. And I had to include this slide as the last one. So 2 weeks ago, launched our new Active Travel Inspector Scheme with the Secretary of State and Chris Boardman, giving kids the power and opportunity to influence the neighbourhoods around their schools for active travel. I've caught up now. Can wait a second and breathe. There we go. So why travel plans? We're working on this model becoming official soon, but we're looking at the social ecological model of behaviour change, looking at how an individual is influenced by all of the circles around them. And that's one you can have a look at and Google off, because I can't explain it in 20 seconds on that one. We're looking at, there we go. We're looking at developing a spheres of influence model for how a travel plan impacts. So first of all, you've got your target audience in the middle, whichever site that might be. You've then got the pupils, the staff, the visitors, the customers that are at that site, the community around that, the passing traffic, competitors, and the wider community, so the town, politicians, and social media channels. And putting that as an example for just Manchester and focusing on school travel plans, there are 212 schools, so 212 spheres of influence, nearly 100,000 pupils, plus parents, staff, visitors, anyone else that might visit the school. So a travel planning program in Manchester for schools would impact at least 200,000 individuals, and that's a pretty conservative estimate. Showing the impact of ModeShift more widely, we're currently at 77 out of 118 England local authorities using the scheme, 5,000 active sites, and about 3.6 million pupils. 3.6 million individuals impacted by those travel plans. So as you see, huge spheres of influence can be impacted. And the good news is it works. These figures are purely from our STARS education scheme, but our top sites, as you can see, the green modes, so our active travel modes, have on average for the schools achieving last year went from 53 to 57.9%, and car use went 27.7 down to 19.5. So they are working and they are delivering what we intend. A couple of quick case studies to show it's working again. So this is our national primary school of the year at the moment, Chewstoke School in Bath and North East Somerset. They've seen active travel levels increase from 37% to 63% over the last 4 years of implementation. We then have University of Essex, who are currently with us. They've got a good travel plan with us. And this one just shows some of the things they're doing. So they've got car sharing initiatives, public transport collaboration, e-mobility options, on-campus activities like Dr. Bike, walking groups. They're making sure the facilities are right with shower cycle lockers, and then awareness and community engagement events. Onto our residential national site of the year. So Linmere, a development in central Bedfordshire, a development for 5,000 households, plus commercial and schools. They've managed to see their bus use go up from 22.7 to 43.3, single occupancy drop, cycling going up, and 53% walking every day as well. And then Cape General Hospital, our healthcare site of the year. Again, this just shows some of the key things they've done. So quality cycle shelters, Lent Fixie bikes, custom bookmarks for people, car share app, and engaging the site in wider stuff for the local authority, feeding into the LC whip. And then our last one, this is a Stars Leisure case study. So as I say, it's a new one. So Real Bedford FC, famous football team, started with just 20 to 25 spectators, ambitions to be over 5,000 spectators, and a new travel plan, a new stadium as part of that. So they're working with us at the moment to work on their travel plan through Stars and work with the local authority. So we know travel plans do some great stuff, help ease congestion, address physical inactivity, improve accessibility, addressing air pollution, improving air quality, helping us deal with climate change and global warming, and sorting out parking issues, which are all major global things. But the big call we're putting out to people is that we've got the most amazing product with travel plans, but we're always asking people to give something up for these bigger global issues. But travel plans will make you healthier, they will save you money, they will get safer roads outside your site, and they'll deliver cleaner air. And we feel that we should pitch things much more around that rather than the other side. Quick examples from around the UK is about securing plans. So Norfolk, many of you might have seen this, they now give developers the option of paying the local authority to deliver, write and implement the travel plan for them. And a number of authorities are following down that route, which secures the delivery of the travel plan rather than just the production of a travel plan document. Darlington Borough Council, another example, they've built Stars into their process. It's not just about producing a travel plan. You have to submit it on ModeShift Stars. And that's through our scheme, so education, community, which is now residential and business. And as the slide rolls on, just an example of monitoring. So what we're starting to see now, you'll hear from Swindon shortly, but in monitoring reports, people are starting to specifically quote the ModeShift Star scheme and the initiatives. In the highlighted section, those codes you see are the ModeShift Stars initiative codes. And on the right is a screen grab from the system that shows our action plan as well. We accept it's not perfect though. So what could be improved? Data is not always being collected or reported on consistently enough. A lot of the work we're doing is in the dark. People aren't aware of it. A lot of the information we gather doesn't go beyond just the local authority. We're not looking regionally and nationally. And we don't fully understand the impacts of what happens outside of modal shift. Another question is about smart targets. Are the targets we're setting really smart? Modal shift targets are important, but if it's not meeting modal shift targets, does that mean the travel plan doesn't work? So there's questions starting to be raised through the focus groups we have, whether we should be looking at other targets in there as well. We recognise it as a bit of a postcode lottery when it comes to whether a travel plan is monitored at a local authority level. Some have great programmes, some not so great. We're working with all of our groups at the moment to try and showcase the top local authorities and encourage other authorities to follow their lead as well as discussions with DFT and National Highways as well. So next steps for us, residential travel plan discussion group, we're doing a major revamp of the criteria for travel plan and accreditation rules, all developed as a team. So multiple local authorities, multiple consultancies, multiple sites participating in the conversation on what a good residential travel plan looks like. So final slide for me is just a call out to help us out with it. So become a part of the team, share your stories with us, share your ideas, share your plans, join our Teams channels where we're having the discussion. Come along to our networking events, conferences, conventions, and get your travel plans accredited through the STARS scheme so that we can champion all the great travel plan work that's going on. Thank you, job done.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick. It's almost like you've done this before, so thank you very much indeed. Lots of hands going up, marvelous. And again, when you got your breath back, if you'd like to have a look at the Q&A, that would be great. Here's just a quick word from our sponsors, so to speak, and there will be a conference about this and other related issues in London towards the end of the year. There'll be a slide on this later on as well, so please just take a note of that, Thursday the 4th of December. in London. If you are able to be there or would like to be there, just bear a note on that and to think about in due course. But anyway, quite enough from me on that, and indeed our sponsors, and we'll move straight on to Claire, who's a travel plan officer from Swindon. Claire, looking forward to what you're going to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Yes, so thank you for having me this morning. I'm Claire Fleming from Swindon Borough Council. I've been their travel plan officer since 2008. John was talking about things in the 90s, and yes, I remember some of those because prior to Swindon, I was working for Nottinghamshire County Council on the UK's first ever travel plan. So I do go back a long way in this industry. So my role at Swindon Borough Council, I'm responsible for all the travel plans that come through the planning process, reviewing them. That's the employment plans, the residential and the school plans. I also support anybody that wants to do travel plans voluntarily. And if that wasn't enough work, I look after all the travel awareness campaigns and the Swindon Travel Choices programme in Swindon. And I'm pretty much a team of one on that at the moment. So I'm a busy lady. If you don't know Swindon, it's a town, not a city. It's quite a compact town, and it's sort of off the M4 motorway between Reading and Bristol, sort of halfway along there. So it is growing very rapidly, and we came to the conclusion sort of about 5 years ago that there wasn't, the travel plans weren't quite working in the way they should. So if you can move on to the next slide. What I will talk about this morning, next slide, please, Deb. I'll talk about my frustrations really on trying to get on top of travel plans that were being secured by condition and sometimes by Section 106 as well, and why they weren't really working, and what we developed around about the year 2020 as what we thought would be the solution to these problems, our supplementary planning document. I'll talk about some of the things that have been working for us as a result of doing that, what we think is really great, and some things that we've learned along the way. So next slide, please. So I think one of the key problems we came to the conclusion is this whole mismatch. I mean, in John's slides earlier on, he said that a travel plan was a long-term management strategy. And developers, really, they're on a short-term gig. A lot of them, particularly residential developers, if you're doing, say, 100 houses, what you want to do is stick your houses up. Once you've got your planning permission, complete the development, walk away so you can get on with your next development. They don't want to be lumbered long term with a long-term management strategy and the implementation of that. And that's completely going against what we want as a council, as a planning authority, as a highway authority, as a travel plan officer. We're so used to headlines appearing like this in local newspapers. We get complaints in sort of 5 years down the line around congestion, around parking, road safety issues, yada, yada, yada. So that mismatch needed addressing, really. And there's some other problems as well with conditioning travel plans. We were getting them in a variety of formats. We were using ModeShift stars and trying to encourage the use of stars, but a lot of travel plans were coming in still as PDFs. And there was a lack of consistency. Some were 100 pages, some were 2 sides of A4. It was becoming quite difficult to monitor those. My time was just being paid for out of core budgets at the council. There was actions being promised at the planning stage that were going unattended. They weren't being implemented properly. As a council, struggling to get any appetite to take enforcement action, particularly on smaller sites where it's sort of, oh, well, let it go. And also, as our local sustainable transport money was sort of coming to an end, we were finding our council budgets were getting increasingly challenged. So we thought, well, what's the solution to all this? So next slide, please. We were looking around at what other authorities were doing, and as Nick pointed out, Norfolk County Council were already doing innovative things, as were Wokingham, Bristol were considering sort of innovation through the planning process. So we looked around at all these things and thought our guidance really isn't working just as guidance. We need something that's enforceable. So we need an adopted supplementary planning document. And like Norfolk, we quite like the idea of releasing the developer from that long-term obligation. So we give them a choice in this supplementary planning document. We're saying, yes, you can do the travel plan yourself. But if you do that, we're going to take a bond and make sure you do it and monitor it properly. Or you can just give us the contribution and we will implement it for you. Through the SPD as well, we took the opportunity to reinforce that STARS message. People must be using ModeShift STARS because that makes it easier then for us to monitor and use the accreditation process. It was enabling really a consistency across new neighbourhoods. So it's quite prescriptive as an SPD. It's saying that the developer must implement it, providing X, Y, Z. So whether you're buying a house south of the borough or in a town or market town, every resident moving into a new development will be offered the same thing. And of course, it's that long-term plan, then the activity will go beyond 5 years. So next slide, please. I think you've skipped a slide. Oh, no, maybe not. Okay. So what's worked then? Well, we actually, obviously, as part of an SPD adoption, we had to do a consultation exercise. We didn't set the world alight with the consultation. There was not much pushback at all. And we found the developers were kind of saying, well, yeah, why wouldn't we do that? That's quite a good idea. They were all very happy. And with us, where we are implementing travel plans for developers, they seem particularly happy. They like the accreditation process that's through ModeShift STARS. That's our Wichita developers there beaming with their good travel plan certificate. So they are embracing it. What we do to sort of prove that we're carrying out our responsibilities when we're implementing on behalf of the developer, we will do an annual report for them. We will outline exactly what we've done, including the monitoring from our resident travel surveys as well. Another success, I'm calling it shadow benefits, because I think one important thing about a travel plan, particularly residential travel plans where you've got new communities being built, is to actually start trying to integrate those new residents into the surrounding community so that we don't get an us and them environment. So things like a car club. We've put car clubs into 2 of our developments now, and we've really heavily marketed it to all the households within a 10-minute walk of that car, even if they're not on the development. It's being paid for by the development, but there's no reason why all the surrounding residents can't benefit from it as well. If we run events, or when we run events, I should say, like Dr. Bike, guided walks, guided rides, we're very keen to make it a whole community event. We'll piggyback things that are already going on in the community rather than doing something on the site and making it very site specific. So we feel that that's really working. And I mentioned about the council pressures earlier. We're finding it's quite a good income stream for the council. We can use the developer contributions to be paying for things that we can spread wider than that development, things like the lift share license, the cycle map for Swindon, and other resources, and all the events we can pay for out of developer contributions and make sure that other residents are benefiting from that. Next slide, please. I think by the council implementing a travel plan on behalf of the developer, we can make some really good partnerships in the community as well. We include the police in our bike marking events, and the police are keen to sort of meet the new residents on housing developments. I'm working heavily with parish councils. Again, they don't always have the money to do events and initiatives, so they're very grateful when we come forward and say, you know, well, why don't we work together on this initiative? We get schools involved and the churches as well. So we feel that we're really sort of making a good impact in a way that if a developer was implementing that travel plan, he might just stick very closely to that site and not acknowledge the surrounding community. And consistency, this was a big one for us. This image is of our New Eastern Villages development, which is going to be one of our huge developments in Swindon. It's going to be about around 8,000 houses when it's fully built out. And it's many, many parcels all fitting together. And so we wanted to integrate that into what would otherwise be quite isolated parcels. So again, I mentioned that, you know, if you move into one parcel, you'll get exactly the same offer as the next parcel. So consistency is one thing that has been very good to come out of our SPD. So next slide, please. Not everything's rosy and perfect. I don't think we'd pretend it is. We do still get travel plans slipping through the cracks. That can be our fault at the council. Sometimes there's sort of miscommunication with planners or with our transport development management. So we're still getting sometimes a travel plan condition, thankfully not the large ones. And then we find in the Section 106 agreements as well, the lawyers, we get different lawyers writing the agreements, and maybe there's things that are not quite how we would want them in the Section 106 agreement. So there's sometimes no consistency there. So there is improvements to be made there. The time lag as well. I think anybody that works in travel plans will know that something that comes along, it can take an awful long time from that initial maybe pre-application stage, and then the planning permission finally goes in, and then it churns through the planning department, and then they get the planning permission. Then there's still reserved matters, so we can be looking 5, 6, 7 years ahead. So sometimes with the funding situation, you're not quite sure when you're going to get those funding in because of the lag in planning. The next slide, please. So the photo on the left is our Wichurstow development, this photo was probably taken in about 2021. In the middle of the photo is a Waitrose. That was there since 2014 in the middle of nowhere. There was another housing development about half a mile off the side of the picture there. But before those houses along the canal there were built, the canal was improved, the paths were put in, the school was built, a pub was built on the canal. So that was really important. We had buses going to that part of the development way before the first person moved in. And we found that is so successful. That was a big key for making this development more sustainable, that everything was there. It was making it attractive for people to move there. And the alternative to that is what's been affectionately known as cowpat developments, where you just build, say, 100 houses in the middle of nowhere next to a big busy road, and there's no facilities in walking distance, and they are much harder to deal with. So the travel plan alone can't solve all the issues, but if you can get in early and start insisting on some of this infrastructure up front, it does make a big difference. And finally, one of the things we're questioning is our SPD suitable for employment travel plans? In it, we do offer to implement the travel plans for employment land, and a few developers have taken us up on that offer, but we're finding generally they would rather go down the bond route, which is fine. We're not sure we've got the funding correct for when we take the contribution. We do it there's a certain price per land class per square meter, and we haven't got enough experience yet doing employment travel plans to know whether that funding level is correct or not. Also this is our Swindon Trade Park, which opened in April. They're taking a very long time to become fully occupied. We've got some units occupied. There's still 2 big units that have no occupiers lined up yet. So at what point do we start surveying? We've got about 20 employees between the 3 businesses that are on site at the moment. So is that too early to do a survey? Is that too early to monitor? Can we run events with 20 staff? So yeah, we're still struggling with that one at the moment. Next slide. And that's it. Hopefully I've explained everything and covered everything, but yeah, feel free to pop things in the Q&A if you'd like to ask any questions about our approach at Swindon.
Thank you very much indeed, Claire. Thank you. More hands going up. As other panelists can see, we're being chased for time here. So I will pass straight on to Rachel. And Rachel, if you could keep this to 10 minutes, I might just give you a little at some point just so we can get more questions in. But as I say, panelists, please do feel free and do get active with answering questions actually in the Q&A chat itself. Rachel, take it away. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Rachel Elliott, and I currently work at Leeds City Council as their Safe and Sustainable Travel Team Leader. If you want to move on to the first slide. I've worked in transport planning in the transport planning field for about 20 years and travel planning for around 15 years, since the then Secretary of State, Alistair Darling, stood on a motorway bridge and committed the Highways Agency, now National Highways, to delivering 100 travel plans by 2010. So I then became the Highways Agency Influence and Travel Behaviour Manager for the whole of the North East region. and we started a journey of delivering travel plans from within national highways on sites affecting the strategic road network. I then went on to spend 6 years as travel plan coordinator for Leeds Beckett University in Leeds, getting some more hands-on experience in that travel plan coordinator role, and then 6 years in consultancy, and the last 4 years here at Leeds City Council. So I feel like I've seen most sides of the travel planning fence. And one of the main reasons I was keen to apply for the role here at Leeds City Council was because of the council's reputation for taking travel planning seriously. So following up on implementation and monitoring, and not just securing them through the planning process to sit on a now digital dusty shelf. If you want to move on, next slide, please. So in Leeds, we've got some very ambitious visions and targets for transport generally, adopted in our Connecting Leeds transport strategy in October 2021, is that Leeds will be a city where you don't need to own a car. You don't need a car to make all those essential and day-to-day journeys. There's some ambitious mode shift targets, and I won't go through all the detail, but that vision is broken down into how we're going to achieve it. And we think travel planning is integral and directly contributes to all the elements of that vision. Next slide, please. We also adopted the Vision Zero strategy for Leeds in September 2022, and that by 2040, no one will be killed or suffer serious injuries on roads in Leeds. It's a safe systems approach where everybody in that whole system has responsibility. And so we're looking forward and evolving what we do around safe and sustainable travel in Leeds, seeing them as symbiotic, where if we improve road safety, we're reducing barriers to more sustainable travel. If we increase the proportions of sustainable travel, the roads should become safer for everybody. And at the centre of the Vision Zero is tackling the Fatal Five, illustrated by the icons there. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to paint a picture of what the travel planning caseload looks like in Leeds at the moment. We as a team prepare on average 180 consultation responses each year, reviewing travel plans submitted with planning applications. So it's our team's responsibility to make sure that those travel plans meet the standards set out in our policy. But then over the years, this has led to us having a significant caseload of travel planning sites that are now live or implementing on the ground. And 86 haven't started on site yet, so those initial triggers haven't been met. And then there's a further 43 in the pipeline where travel plans have been requested, but planning consent is still pending. Slide, thank you. So, and here, this is a timeline of travel planning in Leeds. Again, I won't go through all the detail on all these slides, I think they'll be sent out afterwards. But just to illustrate the journey that we've come on from we've got that the authority has remained committed to collecting every year since around 2002. And we've had a travel plan supplementary planning document since 2007 in Leeds, and that's when we introduced travel plan review fees. I'll come on to those in a bit more detail later. Started taking contributions for public transport travel passes, but that was limited to M cards, which are our annual transport passes in West Yorkshire. So things have moved on. We've updated that SPD. The version we're working to now was adopted in February 2023, and the travel plan standalone SPD was amalgamated into the Transport SPD for the council at that point. And we've also constantly reviewing what we do. Yes, I think we have a reputation for doing travel planning well, but by no means is it perfect, and we're constantly learning as we go. So things have evolved, and we've now got a residential travel plan fund, which I'll come on slide. And the next slide, please. Thank you. So try to outline what we believe the effective ingredients of an effective travel plan are. So in Leeds, we've got that policy backing. I think that's really key, having that set out in the Transport SPD. That contains a detailed checklist of what we expect to see in a travel plan, the thresholds over which travel plan is required. So for instance, for residential, it's 50 dwellings or more. We request detailed travel plans at the outline stage and not wait until reserve matters or have things conditioned to be delivered later. The vast majority, well, wherever we can, travel plans are secured using a Section 106 agreement. And what that enables us to do is to seek those contributions from developers. And the contributions are also index linked to inflation. So picking up on that point that Claire made about the time lag, where we've got that agreement to increase them in line with inflation, that secures the funding and budget needed to effectively implement the travel plan. So we secure travel plan review fees. That covers council officer time to review the implementation and monitoring of travel plans. And we've got quite a standardised formula to working that out, again, managing expectations. And then we secure a residential travel plan fund, obviously for resi sites, and that's based on the cost of a county-wide annual bus-only residential M card, and that's secured for each dwelling with a 50% reduction for sites that are in the city centre or fringe of Leeds. We also secure contributions for, I should say, shared mobility options. So currently, the car club network in Leeds, and then more recently, we've got a public e-bike share scheme called Leeds City Bikes. So we'll secure funds for membership, free trial membership and drive or ride time where we can. The travel plan is listed as a plan on the decision notice. So that's to ensure that if we do need to look at compliance or enforcement action, it's also there in the planning documents. And then it's also important to ensure the budget and funding source for the travel plan is specified in that travel plan document from the outset, particularly where we've got examples of it being a percentage of service charge, where you've got some of those larger mixed use sites. Next slide, please. So another key ingredient is having a travel plan coordinator, and that needs to be a named contact right from that outline stage, in post prior to initial occupation or marketing of the site. And where you've got a larger mixed use site, we'd always want to have a lead travel plan coordinator. We'd set smart targets at the outline stage, baseline to the best available data, and I think this is picking up on some of the points made, linking to the trip rates and trip generation that were agreed in the transport assessment. So we work with colleagues that are reviewing the TA and make sure there's consistency across both. Annual monitoring, again, yeah, there's problems getting response rates to surveys sometimes, so we're increasingly building in the traffic counts or the traffic data will be collected where response rates are low on resi sites. Targets are set and to be met within 3 years of first occupation and maintained. And then monitoring and evaluation for a minimum of 5 years post full occupation, with remedial measures if targets aren't met. So I think those timescales and durations of things are critical to the success of a travel plan. Next slide.
Sorry, Rachel, can I ask if this is your last one? Is that okay?
It's not. You just heard my alarm go off, I think, trying to tell myself.
No.
So the next.
No, it's all right. Sorry, I know what your slides are. I'm just saying if this could be your last slide, and we'll have to leave the case studies just for now, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Thank
so
you
just
very
going
much.
back to the pie chart about the caseload of travel plans in Leeds, a significant proportion of our caseload are resi sites. So we've been focused on developing in more recent years the residential travel plan fund and how that works in practice. So I've just got a slide there outlining how that residential travel plan fund works, the sorts of measures that it can be, the fund can be spent on. And again, we haven't got this running perfectly, but I think we've seen significant improvement, particularly over recent years. And then the remaining slides just go to look at a case study site that did work particularly well, and the reasons why. And then there is a link, if anyone wants to look at the slides later, to a video capturing what the impacts of that site was, not just in terms of the mode shift, but some like talking head feedback from residents that live there and what a difference it's made to their lives in having those measures from the very first point. That's key, the very first point at which they moved into that site.
Thank you very much indeed,
Sorry,
Rachel. I'm
I'm
really sorry having to chase you. No, you're suffering from what came before you. But as Rachel said, the slides will be available for you all later to look at. So without further ado, let's move on to our final panelist. It's Sarah McAlinden from Next, who is struggling slightly with Zoom and the corporate environment around Next, which has just changed over the last few days. But she's phoning in literally from her phone. So Sarah, let's hope it's all working for you.
Hello.
Hi, Sarah. Take it away.
So my name's Sarah McAlinden. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, good. So my name's Sarah McAlinden. I've been doing travel plans for Next for the last 15 years, but I've been working for Next for 25 years. Could I have the next slide, please? Next slide. So why do Next hold travel plans? Historically, it was to appease planning conditions. However, since 2010, Next took the decision to produce the travel plans annually, review them annually, and deliver all year round. And to give some context, pre-2010, we used to use a consultant to produce our travel plans as and when planning requirements requested it. From 2010 to 2016, that's where I took over and did them, and these were written Word documents. And next slide, please. So I find ModeShift great. It's just a simple tool that I use to produce our travel plans and to have them all in one place. So I've not got millions of documents all over the place. It's now all on one screen. I've got the ability to submit travel plans for accreditation. I've got the option to share the travel plans with the local authorities, and through ModeShift, we've been able to get every single Next site accredited through ModeShift stars, and we're now looking at other businesses that Next work with, for example, Jules. Next slide, please. So this screen just gives a little bit of a history of where we started. So as I mentioned, 2017, we joined ModeShift stars. Same year, we achieved the gold accreditation for the head office site. Following year, a silver accreditation for our Yorkshire warehouses. In 2019, 10 of our stores achieved bronze accreditations. 2020, 185 Next sites achieved accreditations. 2021, Victoria's Secret stores all achieved accreditations. 2022, we started a big project working with a company called Ride Tandem for our head office site. This then went on to another big project for one of our other Leicester sites. As a result of that, we've seen bus use increase by 100%. The last 2 years have been buses in my life, and also EV cars. Next slide, please. Table just shows you a little bit of how staff are travelling to work. It's a comparison of 2024, 2025. So this is the head office. To give you a bit of an idea, in 2024, we had 1,000 less staff at head office than we do now. So we're doing quite well to reduce our car use overall. Our bus use, as I said, has gone up by 100%. And obviously we're from home, although we are noticing work from home is getting less and less. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Tips for starting a business travel plan. My tips are to anyone who's just starting out: get your information ready, do a site audit, do a staff survey. Claire mentioned earlier on when to do a survey. I think that should be done from get-go, from the minute somebody starts work. Use your staff postcodes to work out your potential travel issues. Run events such as doctor bikes, travel clinics, smoothie bites, all sorts of things you can do all year long. Contact your sustainability team at your local authority for some support. Run competitions or incentives, for example, free coffee if you walk to work. Appoint a sustainable travel champion. Utilize notice boards and internal email campaigns, and use internal and external sustainable travel websites or apps that staff can easily access.
Sarah, just a second. Sarah? Sarah?
Organizations. So we work with just to name
Sarah? Sarah, sorry, we just couldn't hear you. We're not hearing you. You're breaking up. But Dev, could you put this previous slide back up? We were talking to the previous slide. So that's one that Sarah was trying to talk to just now. So Sarah, if we can move on to your slide, next one, please, Dev, which was working with external organizations. Sarah, if you could try that. I could hear you reasonably well, but you were breaking up quite a lot. So just try again with the working with external organizations slide.
Hello?
Hi, Sarah. Yeah, sorry, you were breaking up quite a lot back there. So we're on to your working with external organizations slide.
Okay, so let me just go back to my page where that was on. Yeah, so other than what we do internally, we also work with external businesses such as Living Streets, Sustrans, Love to Ride, Lift Share, public bus providers, Ride Tandem. Could I have the next slide, please? This screen just details where we currently sit with Motorist Stars. So we've got 545 sites loaded up. 429 are approved travel plans, 105 are good travel plans, 4 very good travel plans, and 7 excellent travel plans. I'm just working with Jules at the minute, so we're hopefully going to have all 125 of their stores on there by the end of this year. Next slide, please. So one of the biggest achievements recently for our head office and Leicester sites is working with Ride Tandem. So Ride Tandem is a public transport operating service where they monitor your actual passenger usage. So we hire a private company, they use the Ride Tandem app, our staff use Ride Tandem app, and we can actually now see how many people are actually getting the buses. And to elaborate, where our site is, there is no public bus service, so we have to pay for our own private buses to get staff in and out. We started off with 3 buses, and we're now up to 16 buses a day, so that's just growing and growing and growing. We also recently merged 2 call centres into one brand new site, so that had a whole new transport package as part of the consultancy, and we spent £500,000 on private buses just for that one site. For staff engagement, we use Google Spaces, so we've got day-to-day chit-chat going on. People will raise whatever issues they've got. We'll sort them out generally there and then, rather than waiting for an annual travel survey. We do still do the annual travel survey, but we're able to deliver and fix things before we wait for the November time when we do the survey. Next slide, please. So this is just a summary. So since 2010, Next has annually produced and reviewed travel plans for all of our sites. The ModeShift Stars tool helps process and manage travel plans for accreditation. Next Stars journey shows our commitment to sustainable travel initiatives. Our successful travel plans require staff surveys, site audits, and local authority support. Collaborating with external organisations is key to engaging employees in sustainable travel. Next slide, please. So what would I change? Local authorities, they need to lead the way. Don't ask a business to produce a travel plan if you don't have your own travel plan too. That is very, very key for me. Targets, I think these are outdated and they should be scrapped. I just find these are a copy and paste exercise. I think we need to show change with all year long deliverance, proving you're doing all year long deliverance, not numbers that we pluck from air. I do tend to find every travel plan I read, it doesn't matter whose it is. They'll all say, for example, reduce car use by 10%, increase cycling by 5%. They all seem to be the same. They're not looking at their actual figures and what's actually achievable. But my overall view is whether a travel plan is to please planning or reviewed all year round, every travel plan helps to reduce single occupancy cars and increase sustainable travel. Every one person that we engage to change their travel is one person that's counted. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much, Sarah. And we heard most of that, your signal covered at the end. So let's go to Q&A. And I'm going to start. There was the issue you raised right at the end there, Sarah, is something that relates, I think, to what we're starting to call sort of vision-led planning, which is rather than just let's just look at what happened in the past and, you know, put some arbitrary targets on it. What about this site? What are we trying to achieve? What does it mean here? What is a reasonable way of going forward? I'd like to come back to that in a minute, but I've got a question, I suppose, which relates to quite a few things that I've seen in the chat. And this will really be, I suppose, for Claire and for Rachel in the first instance, just to say that Ian has now left us. One of the issues about all of this seems to be about resourcing. You know, we haven't got enough time to do it well in the first place. Sometimes lots of local authorities don't have travel plan officers, for example, and yet there seems to be two ways of possibly addressing that. Obviously, developers produce fees for travel plan monitoring, and obviously there can be penalties. But then also that idea that you introduced, Claire, and I think Rachel, you touched upon this too, about the idea of, well, listen, we'll do this for you. And in a way, that seems like a much more robust way going forward of trying to achieve this ongoing, which is the key element of travel plans, as opposed to something that's just in the transport assessment, this ongoing downward pressure on single-use cars, or indeed car use generally. What would you two, between you, sort of Rachel and Claire, how would you see, if you could suggest a big move that makes this financially sustainable and possibly even more than that for local authorities going forward? How would we do travel planning differently in terms of the sort of regulatory environment?
Shall I go first, Rachel?
Yeah.
Please do.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of tools available to local authorities, and we do hear it quite a lot, sort of saying, well, we haven't got the staff capacity to be looking at this, so it becomes a bit of a tick box exercise. But if you can invest just a bit of time to use these mechanisms that are available to do a supplementary planning document where you can impose bonds through the planning process, or even go down the route that we've done and sort of offer to implement travel plans themselves, and also take the funds for travel plan monitoring for staff time as well. In the chat as well, I responded to somebody saying that ModeShift are going to be doing we already do training courses for travel plan coordinators, and part of that training course is all about how to do this, how to use the planning process more effectively. And I think going forward, we could do some more targeted ones on sort of things that have worked for, you know, local authorities, some good practice, and demonstrate that going forward.
Thanks, Claire.
Yes.
Rachel?
Yeah, just to add, so in Leeds, I think I'm just trying to answer some questions in the chat. We do secure travel plan review fees that covers officers' time. So we haven't got that optional model that they have in Swindon, but it is important, particularly in the current financial climates, that if we are going to continue to follow up on travel planning, that we've got those budgets available to cover staff time. So that's how we're doing it at the moment, but we are securing funds for travel plan measures. So the council's role in Leeds is a custodian of that travel plan measures fund, which is then released to the travel plan coordinator, and that is in annual instalments for resi sites. But the travel plan coordinator is still appointed by the developer. But as I said, we are still learning from each other, interested in how they're doing it in Swindon, and we have discussed the idea, particularly where sites we're not seeing the progress that we would anticipate from the appointed travel plan coordinator, whether the council should be doing some of that delivery or travel plan coordination in-house. We wouldn't have the staff resource to do that unless we secured the fees to do it or the contributions to do it through the planning process. Our role at the moment is very much that kind of audit and review. Whether that will change in the future, I don't know yet.
Thank you very much. Picking up on that and that sort of broader point, perhaps for you, Nick, I got a couple of questions just about the integration of travel planning with the transport assessment process. As I said at the outset, I do think there's a weakness somehow in the fact that these things are dislocated. But obviously, as has been discussed, one of the issues with travel planning, that kind of goes on. What do we do next year? What do we do the year after that? And putting aside the questions we've discussed about the fact that, well, some developers are gone, right? They've sold their houses and they're out of here, for example. Would you see a need for closer integration of the original travel planning exercise with the transport assessment, so that, and then it's the transport planning bit of the TA or the TS that is then taken forward in terms of those live measures that change, that develop, we look back and we reflect. I suppose what I'm looking for is that the section 106 might be for the measures within the travel plan, not sort of let's secure a framework travel plan, or there's possibly an outline travel plan in the TS and a framework travel plan, then a full travel plan 1 year after implementation. And then how can that become a sort of a more integrated process? And well, then I think it is, or maybe you think it is perfectly integrated. Nick, if you want to have a go at that first. If you're speaking, Nick, I can't hear you.
Oops, turned the video off, but not the thing. I was saying, right. Yeah, there's been a few questions raised, and Sarah touched on this. I touched on this about the travel plans being monitored based purely on modal shift, and the target's been purely on modal shift. And I think that's one of the drawbacks, because some of the targets are really quite hard, not just to achieve, but hard to monitor as well. This is not official mode shift policy yet, but the direction of travel we're heading in, particularly with the STARS residential scheme, is that you almost achieve a set level of accreditation right at the start. So as I say, particularly on residential, so you would go, right, we're going to submit a very good travel plan. But then accreditation and the planning, the follow-up monitoring is then based on retaining that, because people are more scared about losing something rather than gaining something. So if we give them accreditation up front, they then have to provide monitoring information and reporting data to retain that. Otherwise, they lose it or drop down the levels as well. So that's kind of the direction we're currently considering with our focus groups.
Okay, thank you. And for all of you, there's a question here from the chat that not from the chat, absolutely not from the chat. Sorry, Rachel, your hand's up for that one, so please chip in.
I was just going to add to that I think if there is an issue in the travel planning sector, for maybe this is a personal view, we're still working to very, very old obsolete guidance from DfT, and there's this 10% reduction is just like a standardized target, and I think that's what you still see in lots of travel plans. And whether we need additional guidance from DfT or ATE on this, I think it'd be helpful to get a collection of case studies together, because I think, going back to what Nick was saying, if we've got a site coming through planning where sustainable travel is embedded and integral to it, particularly on some residential sites we've got, admittedly in the city centre where network connectivity is better, then if people are at that life stage where they're moving house and they move into a low car or no car development, so the baseline is very low, is it then still reasonable and achievable to see another 10% mode shift from that baseline? Possibly not, but that relies upon there being a lower baseline in a no car development from the outset. So I think we do need to move with the times. I do think there are some issues in this kind of just applying that 10% mode shift target as a blanket.
I mean, I think one of the things I feel I've said about this in my statement is actually it absolutely definitely needs a refresh, a little think. How is this doing? You know, and having people like you guys chip in at the sharp and thinking, well, how do we make this better? And it comes back to Sarah's point about these kind of arbitrary targets. Well, what is this site? What's the best thing here? It does seem to be something that would help. That I think that would help enormously in terms of making these things more real. Claire, your take on that?
Yeah, I think there's been quite a lot of discussion in the mode shift focus groups about what success actually looks like for a travel plan. And as Rachel says, the guidance is quite old, and historically we've been told it's all about modal shift. 10% seems to be a figure that's plucked out of the air, but you don't want a development with 100% car use and bring it down to 90. You'd rather have something that's got 45% car use and have a target to keep it below that level on an ongoing basis. And as we move towards this vision-led transport planning, you know, it's bigger than the travel plan, really. It's about making this lovely place that's for people and not cars and not vehicles, and making it attractive and prosperous and safe and healthy going forward. So it's, how do we make travel plans achieve that and not just modal shift?
So let me bring that in, as we mentioned before, and again, there are a few questions in there about this, and I'm sure Ian would have contributed. I know one of his colleagues at Mayor Brown is very keen on vision-led planning. It seems to me that that's probably the hook on which to hang change in this field, and it applies to both the transport assessments, in my view, obviously, and transport statements as well as thing, which is, and so I suppose, what would you, if you were starting to write a brief, this for all three of you, for what new guidance, or rather what we have learned and what needs to be embedded in this approach for any given site, and this could be very small sites, it could be much larger ones, which is, what with the whole idea of us trying to be vision-led rather than historic-led, which is where a lot of those targets come from. Well, it was this, let's make it better than that. What would be your sort of key points? And I'm going to start with you, Nick, simply because that gives the other two who've just spoken a little bit more time on that, if that's all right. So, you know, if in terms of new guidance in this new vision-led world, what would be one or two key things you think we need to see that there hasn't been enough of a focus on today?
I was really hoping you'd pick the other two first. For us, I think the weakest part of travel plan implementation at the moment is monitoring, because it's so sporadic around, depending on which part of the country you're in. So like a real strong emphasis on monitoring. But then going back and again, the point Sarah made is that, what are we monitoring? Schools, it's dead easy. We've got a captive audience. We can do nice, easy hands-up surveys in the classroom and capture huge numbers. Businesses, okay, like Next are an amazing example with 85% response rate across their whole workforce. But a lot of workplaces, we struggle with getting a 10% response rate. And is that truly representative? Which is why there's this question mark over travel plan targets. Should it be based on modal shift when we're basing it on 10% of the workforce there? So yeah, those targets, should they be modal, or should they be activity or engagement based, or achieving STARS accreditation or any similar? So that, I think those would be the 2 points for me.
Thank you. Claire?
I think, well, certainly in Swindon, we try and put the emphasis on action-based targets and not mode targets. So when we secure a bond from a developer, if I can get my hands on the Section 106 in time. We sort of say we will release the bond when you have done X, Y, and Z for so long. Sort of after year one, if you've done this, we'll give you a bit of your bond back. If you've done that, we'll give you a bit of your bond back. Because we would like to see, we just want to see people are trying and doing something rather than sitting back for 5 years and then doing a survey and thinking, yeah, I've achieved those modal targets.
Rachel?
I think for us, particularly on the resi sites, as much of an indication of progress being made with the travel plan as a mode split target being met, whether that's through a low response rate travel survey or then going in and doing traffic counts, is the uptake of measures and the feedback from those residents, illustrated a little bit in that video of what difference it's made. So we do have sites where we're struggling with working with travel plan coordinators in their role promoting those measures. It's surprising that if there's something that's generally there on offer for free, that every household and resident wouldn't want that measure, but that seems to be the case on some sites. So it's looking at how well the measures are promoted, which sort of measures are taken up, and then what a difference that's making to how they do their everyday journeys. I think there's been, I'm aware of over the last kind of 3 to 5 years, studies being initiated where case studies are collected together to look at what the impacts of different types of travel planning measures are, so we can get an understanding of what works well in different contexts and locations. I've not yet seen the results, and we as an authority try our best to keep a collection of case studies together, but that's kind of on top of the day job. I mean, I know Mode Shift are doing that exercise again now. National Highways, I think, had a study on the go, but I've not seen the results yet, so I think that would be really helpful.
Okay, Nick, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to take that because we are past 12 now. Can I just say thank you for all of you for listening. Thank you for you as panelists as well. It's always the way we didn't get through as much as we might have hoped we would, but actually I think we've got a really good basis and excellent input for your conference, landlord colleagues, if you're listening for this thing in December, because I think this needs going into, but at that high level, lots of detailed questions as well. Actually, we've hardly spoken at all, I think, this morning about the role of the travel plan coordinator, which is and how does that work out? I'm just going to take a last little note from a comment that has been put in the Q&A by Mark Strong about the idea of dropping targets. And I think for me that would be, we've found in lots of areas that targets are very helpful. They just need to be a lot smarter and rather than less arbitrary, and then you can actually believe in them, heading towards something based on what we might expect. And for me, that's part of vision led. That's certainly part of vision and validate. It's not just, oh, let's hope the world will change. Actually, let's validate that vision, shall we? What is actually likely to be achievable here? How can we push as hard as we can? I think there's a lot of work, a lot more to be done with travel planning. And I suppose it's great to have had this conversation today. For me, I think it's about how do we maximize the value of travel planning in the planning process? How do we maximize its value in actually achieving the kind of long-term sustainable change in how people travel? Is critical to that. And I would love to think that arising from this initiative, arising from other work that Landor will do, and indeed the work that you panelists and you participants are involved in, we will get a kind of refresh in the light of vision-led planning, and perhaps through the work of Active Travel England, who knows, that we can actually get a real impetus behind this and make the most of the good practice we know that's out there, and make that more endemic and more sustainable in terms of financial aspects, especially for local authorities. So all I can say is thanks again, everyone. And I don't know if you, anyway, that'll be it for now. You can put your final slide up again, Dev, if you want to, but let's look forward to that conference at the end of the year, if you can make that, and certainly let's forward to keeping this conversation going. All power to all of you. And thanks again to our panelists, Claire, to Rachel, to Nick, to Ian, and to Sarah. And thanks also, if I might say, to Landor for putting this on. Have a good day, everybody. Cheerio.
Thank you. Bye.